Hello, I'm Cinemod470. For as long as I can remember, Spider-Man has been my favorite superhero, going all the way back to Spider-Man 1 in 2002, and from there I watched the movies that followed, whatever cartoons came out, and even got into the comics. And when Marvel Studios announced that they were making an interconnected universe, both I and countless Spider-Man fans wanted to know when and if the webhead would join it. And with Spider-Man Brand New Day on the horizon, I thought I'd take a look back on the trilogy that brought Spider-Man into the MCU, starting with Spider-Man Homecoming. And if you like what I do, subscribe if you haven't. It costs you nothing, but to me it means everything. Whenever I think about Spider-Man Homecoming, I'm of two minds. I think it's a good movie, but a bad Spider-Man adaptation. Homecoming has a good superhero narrative mixed in with a coming-of-age story, as Peter is trying to become an Avenger by proving himself to Tony, ends up biting off more than he can chew, and is punished by his mentor for his irresponsibility by taking away his high-tech gear, forcing Peter to defeat the Vulture with his base gear and powers alone, which does get him a spot on the Avengers, but he declines because he realizes that he has to remain a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The movie also features a compelling villain and an entertaining group of side characters, and its use of a John Hughes teen movie style properly captures the youthful tone of a modern teenage Spider-Man, especially since most of the movie is set in a high school environment, with the classrooms, the house party, and the field trip. Though we don't get to see Spider-Man swinging around the tall buildings of Manhattan, which is what makes Spider-Man's aesthetic so appealing, the movie puts him in areas spectators wouldn't normally see him, such as Queens, the suburbs, the Washington Monument, and the Staten Island Ferry. So Homecoming is a unique viewing experience in comparison to Spider-Man's previous incarnations. Also, the humor is mostly quite funny. I mean, I didn't belly laugh, but I didn't find it cringe-inducing. It just left me with a smile on my face. There were, however, two moments where I thought the humor was out of place and actually damaged the narrative, but I'll get into those later. Now, as great as the movie is, it isn't the best adaptation of Spider-Man, since though the characters are entertaining to watch, they're a far cry to their comic book counterparts. Instead of Ned Leeds being a romantic rival for Peter, he's Peter's best friend, and a ripoff of Genki. Instead of Flash being the large jock who bullies Peter, he's the short rich kid who teases Peter. And instead of MJ being a flirtatious party girl, she's Daria.
You know Daria? And I was like the cartoon? And he's like, yeah. He was like Daria.
And the character who's the most altered from the comic is Peter Parker himself, and it does him a disservice. Now, when Peter was introduced to the MCU, it had been 2 years since the last Spider-Man movie, and both previous incarnations had gone over his origin story, so the average spectator already knew what Spider-Man's deal was. Teenage boy gets powers from a spider bite, his uncle dies even though he could have prevented it, with great power comes great responsibility. However, the writers not only skip the origin, but remove Uncle Ben from Peter's history, and in doing so risks damaging Spider-Man's character. After Peter's mission with Iron Man in Berlin, he wants to prove himself to Tony and become a full-fledged Avenger. And for most of the movie, that's Peter's motivation for crime fighting and trying to stop the Vulture, because he wants to impress Iron Man. Now, to be fair, there are moments of genuine heroism, like when he saves Delmar after his deli gets blown up, when he gets Shocker One's attention away from Aaron Davis, when he saves his friends at the Washington Monument, and when he stops the Vulture without his Stark suit. So this version of Peter does have heroic virtues, but because of Ben not being mentioned in the movie, nor the lesson Peter had from his death, it smears those earlier moments of heroism because it's under the intent of becoming an Avenger, not because Peter can't look the other way when he can stop a criminal or save someone. Which is interesting because in both Civil War and Infinity War, Peter does act by Spider-Man's mantra, with great power comes great responsibility.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Don't pretend you thought this
No, I
through.
did
I know
think
you
this through.
didn't.
I
You
did
could
think this
not
through.
have possibly thought
You
this
can't
through.
be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood.
And since Homecoming was sandwiched between the two movies, the spectators didn't question Uncle Ben's absence till years later. The likely reason for the disparity was that the writers for Civil War probably assumed that the writers for Homecoming would either retell or at least reference the origin. I mean, they did it for Black Panther. Why not Spider-Man? Don't get me wrong, I understand the reasoning, since at this point it's hard to find someone in the world who doesn't know Spider-Man, and not retelling the origin saves time for developing other characters. But in that case, the writers could have done it like Matt Reeves' Batman and James Gunn's Superman. They both skip over their respective origins, but the world and characters still reference the death of the Waynes and the destruction of Krypton because those events start the heroes' journeys and are the foundations for their morality. Spectacular Spider-Man, my personal favorite iteration of the character, doesn't even show Uncle Ben's death till the penultimate episode of Season 1. Hell, Insomniac Spider-Man started 7 years into his career. However, even though we don't witness the origin, both narratives are abundantly clear that it happened through both exposition and Spider-Man's actions. And though Uncle Ben is kept as a Schrodinger's cat where he both does and doesn't exist until we have evidence to prove either one, it's clear by No Way Home that even if Ben existed, his death didn't have the traditional impact on Peter's character. I spoke about this in my Friendly Neighborhood review, where the series does confirm Uncle Ben exists, but he died before Peter got his powers, completely removing the lesson about great power and great responsibility, which is what makes Spider-Man who he is and why he resonated with so many people. That his first instinct when he got his powers wasn't becoming a superhero, but monetizing his gifts and not giving a damn about other people. And that self-centered behavior got his uncle killed. So now he does the right thing when it matters, because it could be someone else's uncle, father, or significant other. Without that hinge point, Spider-Man isn't the same character, and quite frankly, it does him a disservice. If they kept the original origin, they could have made Peter's relationship with Tony more interesting, since they both started out being selfish with their gifts, and after experiencing the consequences to their actions, they change themselves and become heroes, making Tony the perfect mentor. And speaking of Tony, another consequence of Uncle Ben's absence is that Peter is seen less as Spider-Man and more like Iron Boy, because not only is Peter's motivation to impress Tony, but he is also presented as being dependent on his technology, which does upset Spider-Man fans since he's been presented throughout the years as one of the smartest characters in Marvel and is capable of developing his own gadgets when he needs them. However, I think for this movie alone, it works. Because Peter's character arc for Homecoming is him discovering that Spider-Man doesn't need to become an Avenger or rely on high-tech gadgets to be effective, and earns the Stark suit due to him stopping the Vulture. Hell, there's several instances where the added tech is actually a hindrance, and there are select moments where Peter's intelligence shines throughout the film, where he's developing his own web fluid, his performance at school, and being able to break out of a high security vault with his AI Karen and a calculator.
I've heard this joke before.
But because of Peter donning the Iron Spider suit in Infinity War, and constantly being called the next Iron Man in Far From Home, Peter is retroactively labelled as Iron Boy, and the premise of Homecoming is undone. But on a more positive note, Tom Holland does a great job as Peter. He manages to capture the youthful demeanour and physicality of a teenage Spider-Man, while also portraying believable vulnerability and fear. But every hero is only as good as his villain, and Vulture is the best part of the movie. Adrian Toomes started off as a typical construction worker who's trying to provide for his family and his crew, but after putting in too much collateral on the Chitauri cleanup and having the job taken by damage control, both Toomes and his crew risk going bankrupt. So they start using the salvaged tech from Avengers fights to build their own and pull off heists and arms deals to source their incomes. What makes Adrian compelling is that the spectators can understand his hatred towards Tony, Damage Control, and even Spider-Man, as he feels like all these things are preventing him providing for his family, when really it was due to unfortunate circumstances outside of his control. And because the spectators get to know his family, Adrian's story becomes tragic as we get to witness how well provided they are, and then lose it all when Adrian gets arrested. So Spider-Man's victory isn't a perfect one. Though Vulture's origin story is tied to Tony, which deepens the Peter Parker is Iron Boy criticism, he does have a good and complicated rivalry with Spider-Man, because while Peter is constantly interfering with Adrian's business and risks exposing him to the Avengers, he's also Peter's crush's dad. And the scene where Peter and Adrian discover each other's identities, by far one of the best Marvel moments I've ever witnessed. And it's a guy driving his daughter and her date to a dance. After Peter's battle with the Vulture causes the Staten Island ferry to split in half, Tony takes away his suit, and Peter spends the rest of the movie upset with himself and focuses more on his personal life and schoolwork. Eventually, he asks Liz to the homecoming dance, and the following scene is a fun montage of Peter getting ready. And when he goes to pick her up, Adrian answers the door.
He must be Peter.
Yeah.
I'm Liz's dad. Put her there.
The music fades out, and Peter is shocked. While he's trying to keep his cool, the spectators get to see Adrian in a different light. Instead of the scary, cold-blooded murderer we've seen throughout the film, he's a loving husband and father. And when Adrian is driving Peter and Liz to the dance, a simple conversation between them becomes a claustrophobic nightmare as Adrian works out Peter's identity because of his preceding actions throughout the film. The fact that Peter works at the Stark internship, Ned telling the whole class that Peter knows Spider-Man, and Peter disappearing at both Liz's party and later in DC where Spider-Man saved her. And we get to see Adrian mentally putting the pieces together thanks to Michael Keaton's amazing acting. But because Spider-Man saved his daughter, Adrian gives Peter a chance to stay out of his way. And this same sense of honor is what makes him keep Peter's secret. Because Spider-Man saved Adrian's life despite his belief that the Avengers only care about filling their own pockets and not the people they fly over. My only complaint about the Vulture is when he kills Shocker 1. Because of Shocker's carelessness with his gear, the entire operation could be compromised. And since he knows too much, he can't be let out into the world. So after Adrian gets threatened, he decides to kill Shocker to keep his family safe. And this moment is built up to be a big turning point for Adrian's character, as it's the first time he's killed someone, and he'll do it again to protect what's his. But then it's played off as a joke.
I thought this was the anti-gravity gun.
What? No, that's that one.
Wait, did he not intend to kill Shocker, or was he going to kill him with the anti-gravity gun? Considering how cavalier he is about the whole thing, I have to assume he intended to kill Shocker, but this mandate for MCU humor completely undercuts the scene's mature tone. Now, whenever I discuss Spider-Man, I always carve out time for the side characters, because when written well, they strengthen the story by being three-dimensional or causing conflicting drama. But aside from Liz, who has the most interesting story since she's the Vulture's daughter, and through her the spectators can empathize with his motivation, the rest of the side characters are mostly one-off personalities. Don't get me wrong, characters like Ned, MJ, and even Mr. Harrington have unique and interesting personalities that bounce off well with both Peter and each other.
Probably stop staring before it gets creepy, though.
Too late. You guys are losers.
But then why do you sit with us?
Because I don't have any friends.
Oof, I don't know. I gotta check my calendar first. I got a hot date with Black Widow coming up.
That is false.
What did I tell you about using the bell for comedic purposes?
Can't believe you guys are at this lame party.
You're here too.
Am I?
Taking it all in, Michelle?
Yeah, I don't really want to celebrate something that was built by slaves.
Oh, I'm sure the Washington Monument wasn't built by... Okay.
But they aren't that deep, especially when comparing them to what we've seen in previous installments. Like, the two biggest examples are Aunt May and Ned. May is portrayed as this caring maternal figure who constantly shows concern for Peter's well-being and wants him away from any danger, which is why he doesn't tell her he's Spider-Man. Now, this version of Aunt May on her own is an okay character, but this drama could be given so many more layers if Uncle Ben existed and had recently been murdered, making May afraid for Peter's life due to her trauma, and Peter doesn't tell her he's Spider-Man because he felt responsible for Ben's death. But any deep analysis into May or any of the other supporting cast is mainly from the spectators surmising their histories due to their knowledge from the comics and believing at the time that future sequels would expand on them, which unfortunately, they didn't. When it comes to Ned, I like him. He's supportive, funny, resourceful, intelligent, and even saves Peter's life. But when I say a good Spider-Man character is three-dimensional, I mean they're written well enough to give off the impression that they have a life of their own, not one that revolves around Peter's. Let's compare Ned to Harry from Spider-Man 2002. Harry is Peter's best friend and roommate, but Harry does have his own B-plot in the movie where he's also in love with MJ and is trying to impress his judgmental and demanding father. It may not appear substantial, but it's enough to make Harry feel like a real person, because though he does appreciate his friendship with Peter, he also comes into conflict with him, and their relationship isn't the same at the end of the movie. Whereas Ned can be characterized as a static sidekick who helps Peter out and says how cool it is that he's Spider-Man.
You're an Avenger. If any one of us has a chance with a senior girl, it's you.
Some guy tried to vaporize me with it.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Whoever's making these weapons is obviously combining alien tech with ours.
That is literally the coolest sentence anyone has ever said. This is so awesome. You have a lair?
Dude, a gang with alien guns run by a guy with wings, yeah, they have a lair.
Badass.
Yes! Yes! Hey, big guy, quit moving around!
Sorry, sir.
We don't see Ned have any goals that have nothing to do with Peter, and he doesn't confront Peter about the dangers of being a superhero after he almost died carrying around an alien bomb.
What is it like being famous when nobody knows it's you? Crazy. It's crazy.
His personality at the start of the movie is the same at the end. I'm not saying Ned and May are bad in Homecoming, I just want more than one flavor from them, and I know from past experience that they can be expanded upon.
You were here? You could have died. Do you lay eggs?
What? No.
Anyways, I want to move on to Peter's relationship with Tony, because though I have complained about the whole Iron Boy aspect of MCU Spider-Man, I think their relationship works. Kind of. Let me explain. Considering Tony's personal history, I believe that he is drawn to Peter because he sees a better version of himself. A young, intellectual prodigy who doesn't have the same selfish behavior. And the reason Peter looks up to Tony is because Peter only sees the Iron Man side of Tony Stark. A well-respected genius and superhero, not the flaws that made him want to become a better man. And Peter's relationship with Tony does try to create some good drama, as it's from a teenager's perspective, with Peter believing that the grown-ups aren't paying attention to him. But turns out they are, and both Happy and Tony are keeping track of Peter's actions and take his concerns about the Vulture seriously and notify the FBI. And despite Tony believing in Peter, he knows he has to take his gear back when Peter messes up and puts people in danger. But here's my first issue with Iron Man and Homecoming. Why didn't Tony tell Peter about the FBI sting operation? Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Tony would have told Peter during their phone call on the ferry, but why not before the operation? Peter's been constantly texting and calling Happy about his activities, so why didn't he or Tony shoot a text back saying, FBI taking care of that issue you told me about, don't worry, winky face? In fact, I think the scene where Tony takes away Peter's suit would have been better if Peter knew the FBI would be there and went anyway because his desire to become an Avenger gave him tunnel vision, and he thought that being there would not only prove his worth, but make the situation better, only for the fight to end how we see it. This way Tony is justified for taking away Peter's suit, as all the blame is on him. My second issue is why would Tony give Peter an instant kill feature in his suit? I know it wasn't readily available since Peter and Ned had to hack the suit to get access, and it comes in handy during Endgame, but why would Tony give a teenager an instant kill feature? Especially since Tony constantly tells Peter to be better than him and not cause too much trouble. The reason the rest of the Avengers don't mind killing is because most of them are either former soldiers, spies, or aren't even human. But Peter is just a kid, and this feature was in his suit from the get-go. The whole thing is just like the scene with Adrian killing Shocker. A quick joke that causes issues due to it not matching the character's established behavior. On its own, Homecoming is a good movie with a good coming-of-age story for a young superhero in a world full of superheroes, where Spider-Man is trying to hit the big leagues but has to be brought down to earth. The Vulture manages to strike that perfect balance between being tied to the MCU's history and a villain that challenges Spider-Man in a physical and personal way, and the side characters are all fun to watch. But, and I hate to sound like a broken record, it isn't a great Spider-Man adaptation. And I keep bringing it up because, as much as I love this character, I have to be critical of not only his story, but how his fidelity is treated. Because not only does the absence of Uncle Ben fundamentally change Spider-Man's motivation for being a hero, when it comes to Marvel, not just the studio, the brand as a whole, it pays more attention to its movies than anything else they produce. And despite everything Homecoming gets right, its negative aspects can and have affected the character in future incarnations. And for those who think your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man was a one-off, surely before Spider-Man 2 premiered, Marvel Comics mandated that Peter Parker had to get organic webbing in the comics, through one of the worst Spider-Man stories ever written. But I want to hear what you guys think. Comment down below. Did you like the movie as it was, or do you think it should have been more accurate?